Hello and welcome back to the channel. A bit of a different video today. I saw this game appear during the Steam sale, and I decided to pick it up, A, because it was cheaper, and B, because it was part of a bundle with games I already had, which made it even cheaper again. It's called Gunsmith Simulator. I quite like work simulator games. I have previously posted car mechanic simulator game plays on my channel before. And this one caught out to me because a long time ago, I was a theatrical armourer and therefore worked on firearms in a technical capacity. So I thought I'd have a look at the game for its realism. I've played a bit of the game so far, so I just thought I'd show you a bit about the game and give my comments on how it stands to me as far as realism goes. I should probably point out that I haven't taken down a firearm other than my own SIG P220 in about 20 years. So a lot of this stuff is out of date. But let's have a look around our workshop. In this game, it is actually in early access, so it may change before release. With a lot of these simulator games, you unlock more and more workshop as you play through the game. In this game, the whole workshop is available from the start, although you unlock tools that they're always there, but you don't get to use them until you pass certain points in the tutorial. So just to walk us through, we've got our car over here, which we can use to drive to a shooting range. I don't get that excited about simulated shooting in this game. It's not really trying to simulate the real mechanics of shooting a firearm. You don't work the action, you just hit the mouse button to pull the trigger. I'm more interested in this game from the point of view of simulating the mechanics of the firearm. But that is a function there. You can test the guns at the shooting range. There's also things like CQB scenarios, kill houses, etc. you can play through. These are the guns I've currently got to work on, so I picked 4 guns that I myself have actually worked on in time, so I can speak to the realism of the gun specifically. Over here we have our takedown bench, where we actually assemble or disassemble the firearms. Normally, because it's based upon client order, so you can either buy a gun through auctions or you can take orders to repair firearms. And normally you only take down the firearm as far as is required to service the parts the client requires. But I will change the settings so that we can take the firearms down fully, so you can see the full assembly process. We've got our cleaning bench here to clean parts. We've got our woodworking benches over here for the woodworking components of the firearms, which I've tried to include in the guns I picked. Storage of spare parts here. We have a sandblasting machine to clean the guns off, or the parts of guns. In here we have a chemical room for doing bluing. We have a CNC machine, very handy for machining metal parts. We'll go through that. We have a customization table to add accessories to firearms. We have a paint station, which I don't really get excited about because I've never felt the need to paint a firearm, but it's part of the game. We have a bore sight configuration tool here, so we can use that to configure the scopes on rifles, for example. We have a lathe and workbench over here for repairing metal parts that can be lathed. So let's go and have a look. Let's go pick one of the firearms that I know about. So we'll start with the ubiquitous AKM. So what have we got here? Have a problem with the stock and barrel. Covers in my gun, they look quite bad. As you can see, the wood here is very worn. Like a laminate added. So repair, test operation. We'll start work on this firearm. Let's take it to the assembly bench. Now, because I played through the game, I have unlocked quick disassemble, which allows you to just click a button and it disassembles for you. But I'm going to do this one manually. So I'm going to change this so that we are doing complete disassembly of this firearm. So let's start taking it down. Because the AKM was the follow-up firearm to the AK-47, very well-known firearm throughout history. It became the main firearm of the Warsaw Pact through until the creation of the AK-74. Primarily, the change from the AK-47 to the AKM was about moving from machined parts or milled parts that were made from solid blocks of steel to stamped parts. So, for example, this top cover here was a single stamped sheet of metal, and that reduced the weight of the gun by about a kilo or 2.2 pounds, and just made the firearm easier to manufacture and maintain, which was, I guess, once it became the mainstay rifle of the Soviet Union, that was valuable. Also, something about the AK series is they are very, very robust firearms. You can do a lot to an AK, and it will continue to operate. You know, I've seen videos where they are frozen in ice for weeks, where they are covered in mud, sand, dust. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't remove the magazine as the first thing. That was probably the first thing you should do when you... I mean, obviously you saw at the start there that it does clear the rifle before you start to use it, but certainly should definitely have removed that magazine at the start of disassembly. That's another thing, I guess. I wasn't trained to disassemble firearms in the military like a lot of people were. I learned from another armourer, and so I don't really have a specific order of disassembly. The game does obviously, you know, limit you. You can't remove parts that have other parts, you know, in the way, so to speak, or you know, you have to remove things in a certain order. So you'll see here I can't remove the fire position selector here because it is attached to other parts inside the firearm, like the trigger, like the hammer that need to be removed first. I'm sure that people who disassemble firearms every day for a living or in the military are taught to remove the components in a very specific order, and obviously reassemble them in a specific order as well, probably for both the safe operation of the firearm, but also fast operations. Obviously in a war zone, you don't want your components out for too long. So how are we going? We've still got 4 more components to remove. Here's our firing pin we're pulling out now. We're still missing... I'm trying to find the parts now. I can pull out the cleaning kit yet. The extractor is here. Handguard retainer. Oh, I'm going to find that one. Oh, right down the front. Alright, so there's our fully disassembled rifle. So we've got 4 broken parts, have to be replaced. We've got 4 dirty parts. A lot of good stuff here. And it wants us to do some work on the wood. So, so nothing needs to be removed. We can leave the table. So let's start by cleaning our dirty parts. Receiver, bolt carrier, trigger body, and front gas return. So we just grab our cloth. Pretty simple here. Just hold the mouse button back and forth to clean it off. I wish cleaning metal parts on a firearm was actually this easy. Here's our bolt carrier. Trigger body. And of course our front gas tube. The AKM being a gas operated blowback firearm. Alright, let's do our wood. So, what does it want us to do? It wants us to craft custom wood parts. So we're going to be crafting bottom barrel cover, stock, and top barrel cover. It wants us in the original wood. So this is just very simple. I don't need to be accurate here. Just hold the mouse button down and it draws in the lines. So it's just simulating how you would do this normally. Then we go to our drill, our saw, and carve our pieces out. All right. This is just like cleaning, just click and move the mouse around in order to shape the wood pieces. Wish it were this simple. Although, to be honest, I've never actually had to work on wood on a firearm in reality. Then the wood back. Alright, so we can grab our wood pieces. And we can go over to our staining bench now, and we're going Okay, so this is a bug with the game. It is an early access, so I've just made brand new wooden parts, but yet it's now getting me to remove the varnish from the existing parts. It won't let me proceed to staining the parts I've made because it wants me to remove the varnish from the current parts. With a couple of cases in this game, like, you know, you can either machine new parts or you can buy new parts. In this case, with the wood here, you know, you'd have the choice of going through and removing and replacing the varnish, or just making new parts. I've made new parts, but it still wants me to go through the process. So, which I have had a couple of bugs. I had one time the sandblasting machine would not let me sandblast a particular part. I had to just save and reload the game. That fixed that problem. So, you know, typical early access stuff. Overall, it's quite good though. And then we can apply a new finish. Lovely. And I suspect now, once I finish this, all right. So if I leave the bench now, I suspect it's going to let me, yeah, restain the pieces I just made, which will do anyway. It means we're going to have a bunch of spare AKM parts for the next time someone wants a wood job to be done. Once again, wish actually making wood parts was this simple. Alright, so we're done with the wood. Okay, there's no damaged parts, nothing needs to be sandblasted, nothing needs to be worked on the lathe. We can go straight to the CNC machine. So we have 4 parts that we still require, all can be CNC'd. So we'll start with this one. Yeah, not familiar with CNC or milling. This is, you know, early 3D printing, although 3D printing is normally an additive manufacturing process, i.e. material is added to create what you're creating. In this case, milling is a subtractive method. So as you see, we put a block of metal on the vise there, and the milling machine goes through and cuts out the shape of what we want. You know, if it was a real scenario, this machine would be going back and forth a lot faster and in and out, obviously carving a particular shape. Here it just sort of goes back and forth to carve out of a block. We've got to turn it over. Probably this milling component is my one complaint with the game, insofar as there's not much you can really do other than just sit here and wait for it to finish. As you see, there's a countdown timer there. Sometimes, you know, I try to do things like work out what parts I can't build and then use the time while this is working to go and buy them. But in this particular gun, we can mill all the replaced components. The other thing is that all the parts you mill need to be blued at the end of the process as well. And there's no point in bluing them one at a time, so you may as well wait until they're all done and blue them together. But that just means that this milling process is a time sink. What else have we got? I'll tell you what else we've got to come in terms of firearms. So we've got I'll show there, but we've got an M4 carbine. We've got an Ingram Mac 10, or just a Mac 10, and we have a broken or completely assembled Glock 17 to repair and assemble. So once again, all firearms that I've had extensive experience working. I've never actually worked on an AKM. I will admit I have worked on an AK-47 and an AK-74, but the AKM is not that different. It's just, as I said, components are made differently, but the overall operation of the firearm is almost identical. So in the game, you do get experience points, so which you can then use to spend on particular skills. As you can see, I have gotten everything except for 2 skills. And on top of that, you get mastery with firearms. So the more you work on a single firearm, the more stars you get. And those stars allow you to do things like quick disassemble the gun and also quick assembly. But I actually quite enjoy the disassembly and assembly part, because that's really what gunsmithing is about. Okay, what's next? The other thing I've found with this game is, in terms of the jobs you do, they're very straightforward insofar as it simply tells you, here's a gun, you know, you disassemble it, it tells you which parts are broken, which parts are rusted, which parts are unclean, etc. I would really have liked, similar to the car mechanic games, where it would say to you, this is the problem I'm experiencing, and you have to go through and inspect the parts to try and work out what's causing that. You know, if I think about the most common reasons why a firearm will be deemed as faulty, you're normally looking at failure to fire, failure to extract, and failure to feed. So obviously failure to fire is everything seems to work normally. You put the rounds in, you cock the weapon, you pull the trigger, and all that happens is a click. And of course the most common cause of failure to fire, I'd have to say, would be ammunition. Either problem ammunition or insufficient powder load, or whatever the case may be, bad manufacturing, it simply does not fire. But it could also be things like damage to the firing pin, damage to the internal mechanisms. You know, do you hear that click? Or is there no obvious, you know, is it clear the hammer is not fallen when you pull the trigger? It could be a sear malfunction where the sear is holding the hammer back even though it should be dropping it. Next type is, as I mentioned, failure to extract. That is, you know, the round goes off, but the next round, or so it does not extract the spent brass from the round that you're using. Obviously not an issue in things like bolt action or lever action weapons where you work the action manually to remove the round, although I suppose you could still get a round caught in a bolt action rifle where, you know, you work the bolt but the round is stuck. And that could be things like a failure of the extractor mechanism. It could be, once again, bad ammunition where it's not the correct size and gets jammed. It could be a cleanliness thing where the moving parts of the gun can't move properly. And then I mentioned failure to feed, which is obviously in semi or fully automatic firearms. The firearm should cycle the next round as part of the action when the weapon is fired, and it may extract the round, but it may not feed the next round, which could be, once again, incorrect sizing of the round, could be a failure of the magazine's mechanism, could be a failure of the bolt or the breech to successfully move into a position where the round can be chambered. But normally I would have liked it if, you know, the jobs described what had actually gone wrong in the gun. You know, bullets won't come out of it. You know, it won't load, it won't cycle, etc. Then you've got to go through and work out what's going on. This is pretty straightforward. This is just my wood is bad, and hey, a few other parts are rusty or damaged. Okay, so we need to go and blue the parts we made. Now, I have never actually done this sort of bluing myself, so I can't speak to the accuracy of this process. I assume it would be a lot slower. I have re-blued components. That is, I have components where they have been, for example, I had a firearm which was quite rusty, and I used lapping powders to remove some of the rust, etc. And then I re-blued the gun, but simply using a bluing solution rather than dipping it into bluing salts like it shows here. So it looks accurate to me, but not having done it, I can't speak to more of the accuracy. Okay, so now we can now turn over all of the components that we have replaced with the new ones. That should be everything. Okay. Before we reassemble, we have to oil the new components. Obviously, if I was working on an actual firearm and I disassembled it to this point, I would certainly be oiling almost all of the components, mainly because a lot of these components are deep enough in the firearm that unless you're doing a full disassembly, you won't get to them readily in the future. So it's always a good opportunity to take a moment and re-oil all the components when you disassemble to this level. All right, let's reassemble the stock first. Once again, people may do this in a different order. I'm simply sort of working from left to right in this particular case. So our stock's back together. We can reattach it to the frame now. We can put the handle. We're going to put the handle part in first for it to actually screw into. Okay, reattach the fire selector. Let's back the pin back in. Magazine clip. Let's rebuild the trigger group. battery can go back in now, as can the hammer. Okay, that's the working parts of the gun mainly done. Or at least the working parts of the lower receiver. Barrel back on. There's a specific order to returning the parts of the barrel on the AKs. We need to do the... Okay, now that's in, we can put the wood piece back in. And that's retained. And then we need to put this part on before we can put on the top part. Oh. It's a side lock. Alright, pretty much finished with the barrel now. Where's the sight pin gone? Get the cleaning rod. Alright, keep working on the top of the gun. That's all part of our sighting system. Alright, work on the blowback tube. There's a recoil spring. Cover back on. Reassemble the magazine. Alright, fully reassembled. Now, does it want us to test? It does want us to test. So, in order to test, we want to make sure that the firearm's action works properly in safe, semi and full mode. Now, with the AK, you cannot pull the bolt back while it's on safe. So we'll put it to semi, pull the bolt carrier back. Okay, and then we'll put it onto full. Fine, put it back to safe. That firearm is done, so we can now return it to its owner. Okay, I've hit 3 stars with the AK now. All right, let's do the M4 carbine next. I think this is a configuration change. Yep, reconfigure and repair. My M4 was modified to be a little longer. I don't feel comfortable with it, so I'd like you to change it back to the basic version of the M4. Nothing new or fancy. Thank you in advance. Alright. So the M4 is, of course, so client wants a shorty. There we go. So the M4 is, of course, the shortened version of the M16. Common misconception people have is that the M16 is, or sorry, the AR-15 is the civilian version of the M16. It's actually the way around. The AR-15 came first. Armalite manufactured the AR-15, and then it was sold to Colt, and subsequently Colt developed the M16 as the military version of the AR-15, which was based on the older Armalite AR-10. Very similar looking firearm. And of course this weapon is now ubiquitous with the home-owned assault rifle in the United States. Not that I'm in the United States, but even in Australia we hear stories about AR-15s in the US. So many different variations, so many different components, different manufacturers. Really, it is a very accessible firearm for new people, for experienced people. So many different platform options for it, changes you can make. The bolt carrier, also the bolt itself, the ejector, forward assist. Actually, the forward assist is a funny story. So the forward assist was added to the M16 as a response to elements in the Vietnam War. So obviously this weapon really found it, well, the M16 really found its home during the Vietnam War. And although it was manufactured or tested in, I think, Connecticut was where they were based, they quickly discovered that the jungles of Vietnam were quite different from the areas where the firearm was actually manufactured or was tested, and you had problems like mud getting into it, for example, and preventing the bolt from sliding forward fully because you had the extractor window here that could get gunk and stuff in it, and so the forward assist was added as a component that the user could pretty much give a hard whack in order to drive the bolt carrier forward if it was not quite getting all the way, and become a remaining part of the gun ever since. Buffer off. Buffering. Alright. Almost taken this down. I actually don't know how regularly the average AR-15 or M4 owner would actually take down their firearm to this extent. Largely when I, take down my handgun, it's usually only to the point of removing the slide, cleaning the internal working parts. Alright, so we got 3 unnecessary parts because we are changing the weapon to a different configuration. We need to make or buy some components. We've got some dirty parts. So let's start by getting rid of what we don't need in this configuration. Alright. So we need to... Oh, did it say we had some stuff there? Okay, it looks like we actually have a couple of components from previous stuff I've done. Carbine quad around here, guys. Is that right? Inch barrel. I actually had some parts already there. And a short gas tube. Obviously, I've taken a firearm before and shortened it, or lengthened it, I should say, and those parts left over. So let's clean off our damaged components. Oh, not damaged, dirty components. Buffer tube. I love some of the descriptions, like here. Knob part. Description. Part of knob. Really, really informative. Tells you all about what this does for this particular firearm. Whereas bolt carrier, there you go, it's machined from mil-spec 8620 steel and features a properly torqued and staked... oh, sorry. Cleared too fast. Actually, what I will point out there is it mentions about things like torque. If I was reassembling a firearm, there is a lot more time spent with things like tension and springs and making sure that certain parts are manufactured to the right torque. So I've got everything I need to finish it off. I did not need to make any new parts. Look at that. How lucky was that? There's all these parts up. I mean, you've already seen milling, so it's not like you're missing out on any sort of gameplay here by me just happening to have the parts right. There we go, we can already go back and reassemble. Alright, so start with the lower receiver first. Alright, put this. Sorry, there's a screw there. And a pin. Yeah, some parts it treats separately. Some parts it treats as assembling other parts. So a couple of times, you might actually have a grub screw is its own part, or a grub screw is just something that you operate while pulling something else apart. Action spring back in. Puff back on, put the retainer in. Alright, let's start down here. Alright, let's get our trigger group back together again. Put the fire center in first. Okay, I think that's the lower receiver done. So let's start doing our upper receiver. Put the forward assist back in. Let's do the charging handle. Alright, extract that. And then put the firing pin back in. That's our bolt carrier done. Put a little pin. I may as well do our rear iron sights while we're here. Don't want to forget our knob part. Alright. Screws on before we can get the rail on. Need our gas tube. Then we can get the business end of the firearm done. Alright, attach upper to lower. I guess if you work on AR-15s or M4s every day, if you think that it's correctly shown. Alright. Charge it, pull it on safe. Charge it. Oh, you know, I haven't done that. I didn't. The magazine first. Okay, pull it on safe. Switch it to semi. Full. Put it back on safe. Done. Off you go back to your proud owner of a shortened M4. Alright, let's have a look at this broken down lock. Work on unfortunate cleaning. Unfortunate cleaning sounds interesting. Okay. That doesn't look too bad, actually. It was just mainly dirty. Should be quite fixable. Yeah, there's no broken parts. We're good to go on this. So, Glock is a interesting Austrian firearm. Famous for the fact that it has a polymer frame. In fact, the guy that invented the Glock, I think Gustav Glock was his name or something along those lines, he had never worked on firearms before he designed the Glock. He was a polymer expert and just thought, hey, you know what? I do plastics and polymers. I can go and make a firearm, because the Austrian government at the time wanted a new firearm, and so he developed this, and it's become a very popular gun worldwide ever since. A few misconceptions about it, because the film Die Hard 2 made a couple references to the Glock. I think that McLean at one point says that this thing costs more than you make in a year. In reality, Glocks are actually quite cost-effective firearms, although they may not have been back in the 90s when the film was made, but it certainly wouldn't cost a policeman's salary for a year. Secondly, that he alludes to the fact that, it's, it's a clock, it's I think it's ceramic, in fact, in the film, invisible to X-ray machines. Now, of course, X-rays don't look for metal. X-rays look for matter or mass. So that's irrelevant there. But also, even if what you're referring to in this particular case was a metal detector, there is still way more than enough metal parts inside a Glock to set off any airport metal detectors. So they are not the sort of firearms that you can easily hide and sneak through airports like was previously implied. But they are lightweight. They are cheap and easy to manufacture and repair. So I'll put the bearing on first. Yeah, I don't mind the Glocks. They're actually they were quite well known in Australia where I live, because in the 90s, previously, police here largely used Smith and Wesson K and J frame revolvers, and they decided they needed high capacity firearms, so they went to the Glock. In Australia, Glock became the ubiquitous police firearm here. Interesting with the Glock, it has no manual safety. If you look down here on the trigger, you'll see that there is this trigger safety, a form of sear, where effectively you cannot pull the trigger cannot move to the rear unless the middle part of the trigger is definitely pulled. So unless someone is actively pulling on the trigger can't slide back if the firearm's dropped, for example. Interestingly, I also got a chance to work on and use Smith and Wesson, I should say, Sigmas, which famously were involved in a lawsuit with Glock, who claimed that they had stolen the design of the Glock. That particular lawsuit was settled, and the Smith and Wesson design was changed. But if you look at a Sigma and look at a Glock, especially taken down, you can see definite. Although the sear mechanism is completely different, you can see definite copying going on in the allegedly, I'll say, because it's from a historical legal case from the 90s, but they did look very similar, and it was clearly derivative. All right, let's go test this Glock. Obviously, no need to worry about the safety, because as I mentioned, the safety is on the trigger. So let's rack the action. Give it a pull. That's it. All we need to test. Put him back. And let's get our final gun for the day. The MAC-10. What a horrible gun. But, great for movies. So, the MAC-10, developed by Graham Ingram for, what is MAC? Was Military Armament Company, I think that's what it stood for. Yeah, it was a 45 ACP submachine gun with a high rate of fire, I think about 1,200 rounds per minute. In fact, the 9mm version, the smaller MAC 11, I think actually got up to 1,500 rounds a minute. Earned it the nickname the lead hose on the basis that when it was fitted with a silencer and fired with subsonic rounds, the claim was that the bullets were so fast and so close together you could almost see a line of lead between you and the target. If you were missing, you just needed to move that line onto the target, and that was how it got that particular nickname. Never having fired anything near that sort of rate of fire with a MAC 11 or MAC 10, I can't speak to the accuracy of that, but that was certainly the claim at the time. Yeah, it's not an accurate gun by any means. I think one person historically said that it was a great gun for a fight in a phone booth, when you are literally hands-on with your opponent. But it's had some interesting design components to it, particularly the fact that the silencer that was made for it was designed with a special coating so that you could actually use the silencer as a forward handle. So although there was an aftermarket handle that could be added to the front of it, if you were using a silencer, the option was you could actually hang on to the silencer in order to control the rise of the firearm. You know, normally I would not recommend putting your hand that close to the business end of a firearm like this. A, because it gets hot, and B, because a lot of very fast metal comes out of it. But the MAC-10 was designed, or the MAC-10 silencer was designed in such a way that it could compensate for the fact that the gun was hard to control by letting you put 2 hands on it, basically. I think for me, the MAC-10 was the submachine gun in the first Max Payne game. And that's where I sort of knew it from first, really. Along with, you know, 80s action movies. Alright, I've got to sandblast some parts here now, so let's get our components in the sandblaster. Basically the same sort of concept as cleaning, just doing it with a sandblaster instead. And of course, any part which I sandblast, I'll need to also re-blue. But I better check to make sure I don't need to manufacture some parts before I do that. There's our bolt mechanism. Alright, I'm missing parts. I guess they're parts I can't build. No, I mustn't be able to build them, so I'll oxidize what I've got. Alright, into the soap. Into the water. Into the bluing salts. I'm sure more than for 4 seconds, but you know, in the game it's 4 seconds. Back in the cold water. And then rinse in hot water. All blued. Nice and fast, just like in reality, not. Alright, what do we still need? We need a charging handle lock. And we need the extractor for a MAC-10. Let's buy those. Have our parts. And we gotta swap over what we need. Charging handle lock just here. Okay, so oil it up, then we can reassemble it. I've seen a lot of the missions or the jobs in this game are repeated, and I keep seeing the same one for the back to standard MAC-10, where they keep wanting you to. This is not the standard configuration. Standard configuration had a extending wireframe handle, and that particular one I've had multiple times, and every time they want you to add a suppressor when they're going back to their stock configuration for some reason, even though obviously the suppressor was not stock. Go back in, charging it back on. Because the MAC-10 is an open bolt firearm. You'll see that when we actually test the gun, that it fires from an open bolt position rather than a typical closed bolt position. Be very careful, because it does mean that if it's much easier to get negligent discharges on an open bolt firearm if you're not used to using them, because of the way that you may inadvertently cause the hammer to drop while you believe you're just racking the action if you have your finger in the wrong spot. I think Peacock95 is a YouTuber that I occasionally watch regarding firearms, who gives a good example of with an Uzi of which is another open bolt firearm, where you can see a negligent discharge there. Obviously, he doesn't discharge negligent. He demonstrates how it can happen. magazine back in. And there is our completed lead hose. Let's go give it a test. So reload the magazine. Alright, charge action. So if you look here, when I charge it, you'll notice the bolt is now open. So normally when you rack the action on a firearm, you would see the bolt closed, but in this one it's now open. So we'll pull the trigger while safe. We'll re-rack, recharge it. Now, the safety is this awkward little button under here. Semi, rack the action, click it to full, put it back on safe, back to semi. All done. We'll send this off. There we go. Four completed firearms. Overall, as I said, like, you know, there's some things that you're not going to spend all the time working out how to reset springs, which is probably the most annoying part of reassembling a firearm, of testing the torque on some screws. But overall, like, the parts are clear. You know, the guns look good, the actions look good, the sounds are good when you go to the shooting range. You know, most of the tools are pretty accurate. My only complaint really is that the way that it asks you to do jobs, I would like it to be a little bit more sort of like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with my gun. It's doing this. Can you figure it out? Rather than, please fix this part, this part, this part, and this part, which is very sort of tutorial-like. But once again, the game's in the access, so maybe we'll see some changes to it in the future. As a former armorer, I enjoy these work games anyway. I enjoy these games where you effectively just have a task to do, which is just like a job. You know, I like repairing cars, I like flipping homes, I like gunsmithing guns in these sorts of games. It's a lot of fun for me. Maybe not for you, but for me, it's good, and the accuracy is pretty top-notch based upon my experience. So that's my look at Gunsmith Simulator. Hope you learned something or enjoyed that. I'll be back on my channel with some more non-Gunsmith Simulator stuff in the future. But thank you for watching today. Take care.